Whew. Where we keep this up, we're going to put some cartels out of business. You know what I'm talking about? Yeah. Good evening, everybody. My name is Chris S. I am from San Diego, and I am a heroin addict. And, wow, this is crazy. I'm so excited to be here. Just going to set this little timer here. Whew. First off, I just want to dedicate, tonight, I want to dedicate this talk to you guys, to a guy by the name of Wayne H. Those of you who don't know, Wayne H. is the one that brought Heroin Anonymous to San Diego from Phoenix back in 2009. And I met Wayne in 2010, and that's when I started coming to HA. And Wayne passed away from this disease about 2.5 years ago. You know, that's the reality. The fact of that, just while I'm sitting here talking to you guys, between 15 and 18 people will die from this disease. Means that these first 3 rows are all going to disappear. Breaks my heart. What inspires me is that we got a room full of this many people from all over the country that took time out of their lives to come here and to fellowship and to figure out a way that we can take this message back and help other addicts. That inspires me. I'd like to take a second and also thank Paul and all the staff for doing an amazing job. I want to thank all the other delegates that have been here for the last 2 days, working on ways that we can keep HA alive in its tradition so that we can have these conventions for the next 2,000 years. I won't be here for all of them, but I'll try. And, I also want to give a couple of shout-outs to HA Atlanta. When I was down there a couple months ago, man, those guys, they know how to do some hospitality over there. If you guys ever get to Atlanta, man, make sure you get to an HA meeting. And I love that the fellowship is still so new, because I go on the website, and I'm like, I'm Atlanta, and I was there for a big conference with some people, and I look it up, and, it's like, still says his name. You know what I mean? Like, oh, call Tim. I'm like, sweet. You know what I mean? And I call him up and expecting I'm going to get like some message or whatever. He's like, hey, this is Tim. I'm like, sweet. I'm like, hey, bro, this is Chris, man. I'm HA from San Diego. And he's like, what? Get the hell out of here, man. You're like a pioneer. I'm like, what? No, that's crazy, man. I'm just in town for a couple days. And I'm like, listen, man, I'm going to take an Uber and come over to your meeting. Is it going on tonight? And he's like, screw that, man. I'm coming to get you right now. Where are you at? And this guy drove like all the way across town. He picked me up, took me to a meeting, got to hang out with you guys. It was awesome. It was a great meeting. It was like probably 50 people there. And this is what I love about it, right? I'm like asking people, like, how long has the meeting been going on here? They're like, 2 years. I'm like, that's awesome. I'm like, how much clean time you got? They're like, 2 years. I'm like, that's what I'm talking about, man. Keep it real. That's how this thing starts, right? We're not dealing with all that old-timer nonsense, you know what I mean? We're just trying to get through the day. Woo! And I love it. And I was and then I went out to Colorado Springs, and I went to an AA meeting, and an HA meeting broke out. Like, they're vicious out there, man. You walk in, I was like, oh, thanks, brother. Yeah, I was like, oh, this is an AA meeting. That's great, man. I'm like, there was an HA meeting. Oh, they're like, it's tomorrow, but don't worry, man. We run the AA meetings, too. I'm like, okay. And they did. You know what I mean? Every person that shared was like, hey, I'm Rick. I'm a heroin addict. I'm like, this is awesome. But, I'm very blessed that I get to travel around the country and I don't know, man, go to HA groups now. For me, it's, I played in rock bands most of my life. And, don't let this fancy outfit fool you. We'll get to all that. But I remember, I'd be going on tour, and I would look at, a map of the country, and I'd have to, map out my progress. You know what I mean? It'd be like Seattle, smiley face. Portland, smiley face. Boise, sad face. Billings, double sad face. Detroit, sad face. You know what I mean? I'd be work Cincinnati, just a skull and crossbones. You know what I mean? And then it'd be Boston, 4 stars. New York, 5 stars. You know what I mean? We're getting white dope. Woo! Man, I'm telling you, man, it's tough being a heroin addict. You know what I mean? Especially back in those days. You know what I mean? It breaks my heart, though, that, in the places that I used to not even be able to find any weed to get me through, I get calls from parents every day asking, like, what can they do with their kid? Or they call me saying, man, my kid just died. And I'm like, what? In Cincinnati? You guys have heroin there now? And they're like, yeah. And I'm like, man, it freaks me out. But that's the thing, right? That's what we're dealing with. And, you know, when they chose me to speak tonight, it was such an honor, you know, because I love this program so much, and I love being part of HA. And they didn't even realize this, but this has such extra significance to me tonight, because when I was 17 years old, I first used heroin about 3 miles from here. This is my first place where, when I was 17 years old, was the first time I used heroin, and I used it in Portland, Oregon. And now here I am, quite a few years later. We don't need to say how many, it's not important. The point is we're all here today. And so for me, this is like crazy, you know what I mean? This is where my whole addiction started. And then I get to come back today and, you know, let God talk some sense through me into this room to give somebody some hope, man. It's just like, gives me emotional. And it's not that my life has come full circle, because I got a lot left. But it's just the fact of that, you know, it talks about everything that we lose in that addiction. If we continue on a spiritual path in this program, man, we get back. And I'm a firm believer in that. But not to make you guys think that it's all roses and unicorns necessarily. It is for me. I will put a disclaimer out there. I am probably the most enthusiastic HA speaker on the face of the planet, because I love this program and I love being a part of it. And my life today isn't beyond my wildest dreams. I hear that a lot in the rooms. But man, let's be honest, I'm a heroin addict. I got some pretty wild dreams. But it is better than I ever thought it could be. And for that, I'm truly grateful and truly blessed. You know, before I got to HA, I had big problems and a small God. And today I got a big God and I got small problems. And it doesn't matter what's going on, and we'll get to some of that later. But, you know, I want to qualify a little bit just to give you guys an idea of what it was like at the end. You know, I was living in the bushes off Hollywood Boulevard at one point in my life, you know, pushing a shopping cart and addicted to heroin and, I don't know, some crack and some other fun stuff. But you know, I remember coming to in the bushes one day, and the thing is like, I didn't wonder, like, why I was in the bushes. You know, it wasn't one of those things where I wake up and I'm like, oh, man, I must have got really hammered last night, you know what I mean, to do this. Like, I was living in the bushes on purpose because I was so broken that I couldn't stand to look another human being in the eye, you know? And it was bad enough sitting there and looking out and, like, seeing the dogs walk by and just getting resentful against the dogs. Oh, yeah, I bet you're having a great day, aren't you? Yeah. Sure, man, you suck. And, but you know what happened is I woke up and, you know, I'm sitting there and, you know, there's like these flies are just buzzing around my head. And you guys all know, like, the only thing worse than cooking up a shot and having flies fly around you is cooking up a shot and sneezing, right? And so I'm sitting there and these flies are buzzing and I'm like, oh, you know, it's aggravating. They're landing on my face and everything. And I'm just like, God, like, I don't have enough problems as it is, you know? And I turn around, you know, and there's like this huge pile of like dog crap. I'm hoping it's dog crap. And I'm just like, you know what? That describes my life right there. You know what I mean? Like, I just can't even sit in the bushes, be broken, and do my dope. Like, there has to be this big pile of dog crap attracting all these flies. You know, like, what did I do to you? And so I decided, you know what? I'm going to move this place. So I get up out of my little spot in the bushes, and I have another spot that's over off of Sunset Boulevard in, like, La Brea. And I go over there, and there was this dumpster behind this office building, right? And so I go back to my dumpster, and I move out the dumpster, and, like, no joke, but, like, right there under the dumpster is a pile of human crap. And I'm like, you got to be kidding me. Like, first of all, I can never make this story up. So, you know, I'm like, you got to be kidding me right now, you know? But you know what? When you're dope sick, man, what are you going to do? Find another spot? Nah. So I went over there, and I'm like, don't breathe, right? And I'm sitting there, and just as I'm getting ready, the office door opens up. And I'm like, oh, man. And the thing is I'm not even worried that this guy's going to catch me in the act of shooting dope. I'm worried that he's going to think that this crap is mine. Right? Like, that's how, like, sick I am. You know what I mean? I'm like, oh, no, this guy's probably going to think that I'm like, this is not mine. It was here. You know, I'm like, not worried that he's going to see me like, what is this guy doing, you know? And lucky for me, he got like a phone call, you know what I mean, before he got to the dumpster. And he's like, oh, yeah, it's in my office. And he went back inside, and then I finished up my business and took off. But, I mean, that was just like a regular day, right? You guys know what I'm talking about. About 9 years later, my morning routine was this. I would wake up, I would take a shot of vodka. I had one of those like little Home Depot paint buckets next to the side of my bed. I'd throw up, I'd take another shot of vodka, I'd throw that up, I'd take a third shot. Usually that one would hopefully stay down. I'd snort half an 80 Oxycontin that I would have already ready to go, smoke a little bit of weed, and then lay in the fetal position for about 5 minutes and 17 seconds to 5 minutes and 28 seconds, which was the exact amount of time that it took so that I could get out of the fetal position, take the covers off the bed, and get out of bed. And that's how I lived. And the reason why I share that story is because I want to show you guys that, one, I was addicted to heroin, and two, I was addicted to Oxycontin, but it's the same feeling. So I want everybody in the room to feel comfortable by being here. Okay? And I'm like the dyslexic guy. Like what idiot guy gets on heroin and then it increases his price? Like, what do I think, I'm a baller? Like, oh, I used to do heroin when it was too cheap. I'm on the oxys now, you know what I mean? It's cool. Maybe I heard I'm doing pretty good with life. Everything's cool, you know what I mean? I wanted to up my game a little bit. Can I borrow $5 to ride the bus? I got to meet my guy, you know what I mean? But no, seriously, I share that, you know what I mean? Because that's how my life is, you know? It didn't start like that, you know? Like, growing up, man, like, you would never think that I was going to be a heroin addict. Like, I'm sure none of you guys thought you were going to be heroin addicts, you know? I grew up, my parents were missionaries, so I was like an MK, a missionary kid. You know, and that's a dilemma. When you're like 17 years old, and you're like a missionary kid, and then you're a heroin addict, like, that's a dilemma. You know, because, like, your heroin addict friends, they ain't going to church with you. And your church friends definitely ain't going to shoot no dope with you. So, like, you're really kind of feeling isolated at that point. Literally, you know what I mean? It's like angel and devil. That's how I've lived my whole life. But it's like one of those things of, like, where at 15 years old, my dad came to me, and he said, Chris, you know what? Here's the deal. We've been very tolerant of your music and of your hair choices. At the time, I was I still am, a punk rocker, and I had a mohawk. And, you know, back then it wasn't like these churches they got nowadays. You know, it kills me. You go to church nowadays and, like, the whole, like, music ministry is just covered in, like, neck tattoos, and they're all hanging out. Like, hey, let's praise God. I'm like, man, yeah, I walked into church like that. It's like, get out. Satan's here. Get out. You know what I mean? Like, literally. But, you know, that was the thing. He said, you know what, we've been very tolerant of your music and of your hair choices, so we want you to, you know, get a regular haircut, start wearing regular clothes, and be part of this family. We're moving over to Europe to be missionaries, and if that's a problem for you, then, you know, you can go ahead and find your own way. And what I heard is that A, Christians can't have cool hair, B, that my dad cared more about what his church friends thought about my appearance than he actually loved me, and C, if I didn't like it, then I was free to go out on my own. So I thought about it for a couple days, and I went back and I said, you know what? A, I don't want to be a missionary. B, I already hate you. And C, I'll see you later. And that's it, right? At 15 years old, man, I grabbed my skateboard, my bass, and my backpack, and that was it. I walked out. And then I decided to move to L.A. As soon as I turned 16, like 3 months later, I said, I'm moving to L.A. because I want to be a famous rock star. That's been my whole deal. Since I was like 7, that's all I've ever wanted to be my entire life. I'm very focused. And you know, when I went down there and instead I got involved in like street gangs and, you know, and in dealing drugs. And, you know, I still hadn't even really taken any drugs at this point, you know what I mean? Because when you're that young of a kid and you're on the streets of L.A., you know, like every single person is out to get you in that area. You know what I mean? If you're like in gangs and things like that, man, it's like it wasn't fun. You know what I mean? Like my life wasn't fun. It was like every waking minute, even still to this day, if I hear like a car pull up real slow behind me, I'm like, you know, because that's how I was living. And I decided, you know what, I can't deal with L.A., and so I moved back to Portland when I was 17. And I was doing the things around here and becoming this, little rock star kid or whatever that I thought what you did to become a rock star. And I'll never forget the first, time that I did dope, man. This guy came over to my house, and he was dressed very similar to this, and he did not look like a thug. And, and he asked me, he said, hey, man, can you get me some heroin? And I was like, what? Heroin? What, are you crazy? That stuff's bad news, man. Like, I'll get you as much coke and weed as you want, but I'm not touching the heroin, And then he told me how much money I could make. And I said to myself, what? Well, hold on a second. Let me make a call. So I made a call, and that person said the exact same thing that everybody else would say in my life. Don't touch that stuff, man. You don't want to go down that road. And I'm like, don't worry. I got this. I'm not going to touch it. I'm just going to sell it. Right? And I did the first time. But, of course, what happens? The guy calls me a week later, says, hey, can we do that thing again? I said, yeah, no problem. So he comes over, an hour later, and what's he say? Hey, I'm short on money. I'm like, I bet you are. Had I known then, right? But he said, why don't I just give you some of this? And I said, for what, man? I don't want that stuff. And he said, okay, well, how about getting me some foil? And I said, well, foil? What do you need foil for, man? The bong's right there on the table. And he said, I'm not going to smoke weed, you idiot. I'm going to smoke some heroin. And I went, what? You can smoke that stuff? Because this was back, I'm like 17 years old. I don't know nothing about heroin. I'm like, if you could smoke it, though, well, that changed the whole deal, right? Because I was already smoking coke and weed and cigarettes. I'm like, what's a little heroin going to do? And that's the day, right? The day all of us are sitting in this room, right? Because all of a sudden what happened is, I took a little hit off that, coughed for a few minutes, took another hit, and all of a sudden, man, like the biggest, warmest blanket engulfed my entire being. And for the first time, it was okay just to be Chris S. as he was. This little insecure 17-year-old punk rock kid living on his own, dreaming of being a humongously famous rock star. And no parent, and no friend, and no gang, and nobody else was going to tell me any different. And that's one of the things, that we talk about in addiction, and I think Dr. Gabor Mate really presents the easiest way for me to describe it, and that is that all addicts suffer from three main things, and that is shame, stress, and lack of connection. And typically how that goes is like at some point in our lives between the ages of like 4 and 6 or 5 and 7, we have this like traumatic event. Maybe it's like your parents get divorced. Maybe it's like you get bullied. You have to move to a new school. And for most people, that's not that big of a deal. But for some reason, addicts, what we tend to do is we take that experience and we plant this little seed in the back of our heads. And what it says is that I'm not okay just how I am. There's something wrong with me. I don't know what it is, but there's something wrong with me. And then that's the shame part. And then we get to the stress part, which is like between the ages of like 14 and 16 typically, where like we start high school or something, and it's like all this stress comes on. It's like, hey, what do you want to be? You want to be a jock? You want to be a rocker? You want to be a tech guy? You want to be a nerd? You want to be a science guy? You want to be a cheerleader? Right? And then your parents are like, you better get good grades or we're kicking you out or you won't get into college. And like all these things. And we're like, what? I don't even know what to do. Right? And maybe your parents like, you're going to medical school. And you're like, I want to be, a dancer. I don't even want to be a doctor, Mom. Doesn't matter. You're going to do what we tell you. Right? And then all of a sudden that just keeps going on in that little brain, right? And it's like, now there's definitely something wrong with me. And then we meet our friends' drugs or alcohol, right? And what that does is it releases this thing in our head called dopamine, right? And what it does is it tells us everything is going to be okay. And the brain don't know that you're putting heroin into your body. The brain, it could be a piece of chocolate cake. It could be booze. It could be whatever. But the brain's just telling you, hey, whatever it was that we just put into our body, that is awesome. And keep doing that because this is the best we've ever felt in our life. And that's exactly what happened to me. And I didn't care about the consequences. And I didn't have consequences for like a long time. It didn't automatically just go downhill. I mean, honestly, for like a long time, I had a great time. I was playing in bands. I was touring all over the world. I was drinking and using. And, man, I was having the time of my life. But then it turned on me, right? And when I could have quit, I didn't want to quit. And when I wanted to quit, I couldn't quit. And that's when the trouble started, you know? And it was like, I just had this thing in me where I was so driven to be successful because I had to prove myself to everybody else, you know? Like, it didn't even matter. I just had to be right all the time. And the thing is that, you know, now I've come to understand that that's the disease of addiction, right? Like, that's the disease that we have, right? It's like codependency at its finest. You know, and that's one of those things of like where it doesn't matter whatever I get, it's never good enough, you know? And at 30, you know, I met my first wife. No, sorry, I met her at 25. We got married at 30. And, you know, we bought a house in Santa Monica. And she was, you know, she was an executive of a super cool video game company. And I thought, man, this is awesome, right? I've made it. Like, I got a house and a wife, and I started out with a skateboard and a backpack and a bass guitar. And now I got all these things. I'm like, I'm good. So you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to cut back on all the bad stuff, and I'm just going to drink Coors Light. Oh, man, right? It sounds foolproof, don't it? You're like, Coors Light, that stuff's like water, right? How could anything possibly go wrong? I don't know, but, man, I'll tell you, that Coors Light will sneak up on you. Joel knows what I'm talking about. Yeah, man. And I don't know, that lasted for like a couple months, and then, you know, and then I met a guy. I hear that in all the rooms, but yeah. And, you know, and then next thing you know, there I am, right back on it, right? Except this time, the bank account I'm emptying isn't just mine. It belongs to somebody else. And, you know, and I'm doing all these things. And then that day comes when, you know, she's like, get out of my house. And I know I'm in deep trouble because it used to be our house, and now it's her house. And that's when I hit the streets, you know, and I lived on the streets for like a year. And finally, you know, I became unrecognizable to myself, you know, like that time when you look in the mirror and like you don't even recognize who you're looking at. And you're like, what? Oh my gosh, that's me? How did that happen? And so, you know, and I was like so homeless and so desperate at this point, I had to go to the library and sign up to get on the computers, you know. And then they give me like 10 minutes, you know, because at the Hollywood Library, there's like 80 homeless people there just waiting to get on, I don't know, check their stocks and bonds or something. But they, you know, we're like sitting there, and so I go and I write this email to my sister, hey, you know, so I haven't talked to you in a long time, I'm homeless, and I need some help, please help me. And then I came back the next day at like 7 a.m., and, you know, and my sister's a lawyer. We're completely opposite. Maybe you guys have that in your family, I don't know, but yeah, the good one. And I love her to death, though. But, and so she sends me back this like 3-page document. You know, if you want to come stay at my house, this is what you got to do, right? You got to get a job in 72 hours. You won't use drugs, or, you know, you start going to meetings, blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, okay, I'll do it. But then, of course, you know, I'm a dope fiend. So what happens? She sends me the plane ticket and the money. And at 6 a.m. when my flight leaves at 9 a.m., I decide, you know what? I bet I can race into downtown LA one more time, right? And I do. And I spend 50 of the 60 bucks. Then I get back to my room, and I got burned. Oh, right? Like, just another sign from God. I'm like, you know what? That's not funny. This was going to be my last time I made a promise. And, you know, that's what happened, right? And then I didn't have a way to get to the airport. And I made some calls, and luckily I found somebody who said they would take me on this premise that I never come back to Hollywood, California ever again. He said, I'll give you a ride. This is the deal I'll make you. If I ever see you in this town again, I'll kill you myself. And I said, okay, I'll make you that deal. And, you know, and I got out to where my sister lived in Virginia. It was a big culture shock. And, you know, and what happened was like within 6 months, I was like already in line to be a firefighter, you know? Because us dope things. I don't know about you guys, man, but we bounce back. You know what I mean? We're like resilient. And so, you know, I became a firefighter, and I had been living at my sister's house. She gave me a new car, and she gave me, you know, permission to move out. I had 6 months. I drove over to my new house, living with a couple other firefighters. I walked in, put my clothes on the bed. I went to the bathroom. I flipped open the medicine cabinet, because that's just what I do. And there's a big bottle of Vicodin. I do the math real quick, realize they've had it for a month. They've only taken 2 pills. And I'm like, you know what? I'm moving my stuff. I should probably take a couple so I don't hurt my back, right? Because it's tough when you're moving like 10 leopard jackets and a pair of pajamas. You know what I mean? You don't want to mess up that back. Because what else? I had nothing else. You know what I mean? I've been homeless for like a year, like living in my 6-year-old niece's room. Like I didn't have a bunch of furniture or nothing, you know? And so I did, you know, and there I go again, right? Except that time, the consequences were a little bit more because within 2 years, I got that felony hit and run DUI on a police officer. And, and even that, right? I'm like, you know what? It was my light. He didn't see it that way. But, once again, that was God working in my life, right? Because, at the time, my sponsor, because, this is me trying to be sober. Like, we're not even talking about the old days. This is me trying to get sober, just so we're all on the same page right now. And my sponsor at the time knew the policeman, and he called on my behalf and said, hey, man, please don't send Chris to prison for the rest of his life for this. He's a good guy. He's just broken, man. He needs help. And that cop dropped the charges. I still got the DUI, so I lost my job as a firefighter, but at least I didn't go to prison for 10 years. And even that wasn't enough, right? On the way home, what'd I do? I had the cab driver stop off at 7-Eleven so I could pick up a beer. Because I don't know about you guys, man, but when you get a felony hit and run DUI on a cop, you need a beer on the way home. That's how I think. I mean, maybe some other people, they would have got a donut, not me. I'll save that for later. But, it was just that, and it was like, and that was just back in it, you know what I mean? I ended up in Las Vegas, right? Because that's where I should move to, right? Good thinking, right? You guys already know the story, right? Like, you guys are like, Chris, that's a great decision. You should move to Las Vegas with wife number 2, right? That went over like, that was awesome. And that's how I ended up laying in that bed, incapacitated from drugs and alcohol. She was long gone. Everybody was gone, and there I laid. And finally, one day, I had one of those moments of clarity. Actually, that's not even true. I'm a New Orleans Saints fan, and on that day, the Saints were playing in the Super Bowl. And about halfway through the fourth quarter, I looked up at the sky. I couldn't even get out of bed. I couldn't even enjoy that my team, that had been like the worst team in football for 30 years, was in the Super Bowl, even though I'm living in Las Vegas. I'm drinking a bottle of like Barefoot Bubbly. And I know it's going to get more embarrassing after this too, but anyway. And when I said it like this, I'm like, you know what, God, if you let the Saints win the Super Bowl, I'll try and get sober again. That's the deal I'm making. Because I figured Saints are never going to win the Super Bowl, so I'm safe, you know. Damn that Drew Brees. Oh, man. I'm not blowing your anonymity, Drew. I'm just saying, you know what I mean? Like, you really, Yeah, and then the Saints won the Super Bowl, so now I'm paralyzed with fear because I'm like, how am I ever going to get sober? But I made a deal. And I'd made a lot of deals in the past with God, but this was the first one he actually came through on. So now I'm like scared. I'm like, oh, he finally heard me. Like, uh-oh, careful what you wish for. But it was one of those things of like where after the game they showed the city of New Orleans and they showed like all these people that had been in Hurricane Katrina and people that had done nothing wrong in their lives had been displaced and they were carrying their kids through like these waters filled with sewage and I saw these people that were just broken down, man, and going through like all this trauma. And then they showed after the Super Bowl and they showed like all these people had come together. And they were, and they were celebrating. And I'm like, you know what? If those people can do it, I can do it. And I know where to go because I'd already been trying to get sober for 10 years at this point. And I was already on my 15th sponsor. So if you guys are coming back in, please come in and sit down for a minute and hang out with us. It took me 10 years to get 3 years, and it's taken me 13 years to get 4 years, 8 months, and 30 days. For that I'm grateful. My sobriety date is January 1st in 2014. And, it's all of us, man. It's all of us. But, the thing about it is, man, is that, and I hear this a lot in the rooms, and so I want to talk about this as well, is like, part of this thing is that, I get sober, right? And for like the first 3 years, man, things are great. Like all this stuff comes back, right? Like all of a sudden I'm on fiance number 3. I'm a hopeless romantic. I got a new car. I'm managing a sober living. I like to say I was managing like a Dr. Drew sober living, right? Not like the shout-out shit shack I went to sober living in, but this was like one of them mansions on the beach, you know what I mean? And I had a great job, and everything was awesome. And then one day I was at, I worked at a restaurant, and somebody came up to me and they said, hey, listen, I know you don't drink, but we just opened up this $200 bottle of wine. Would you like to try it? And I went, you know what? I don't drink. I think I will try it. Right? I'm a heroin addict. I'm not an alcoholic. Right? I mean, I might have been, I might have minored in alcoholism, but that wasn't my main problem, you know what I mean? And plus, I've been sober for 3 years. So I took a drink, and the worst thing happened. Nothing. And you know what? I went home to my sober living, and I texted my fiance goodnight. I said goodnight to all my 5 sponsees, laid my head down, went, so nice to be sober and be able to drink again. So a couple days later, when I was at a wedding, somebody said, Chris, you did a great job planning this wedding and everything. We really appreciate it. Would you please toast the family? I went, you know what? I did do a good job. Give me that. Champagne, right? That's what royalty drinks. That ain't no alcoholic drink. That's champagne. Oh, yeah. So I took that one down. And the beast was awoken, my friends. And that was it, right? And there I was, right back there, man. Car's gone. She's gone. It got so bad, I'll share this, but it's embarrassing. But, man, I was drinking the Mike's Hard Lemonade. I mean, I'm a dope fiend. That's embarrassing. You know what I mean? Like, you don't want to admit that in mixed company, but I'm trying to be vulnerable right here with you guys and honest. And that's where I was, you know what I mean? I'm like, do you have any more of the cherry lemonade back there? It's like, I don't really like the blackberry. It upsets my stomach. Oh, true conversations. That's how I'm living. Woo! And, within a week, man, I was drinking around the clock, and then it all starts, right? That's how it goes, man. And so if you're sitting in this room and you think you don't have a problem with alcohol, you want to know how to make sure you don't pick it up. Please. Because this isn't like Alcoholics Anonymous. We don't. If you don't think you are a heroin addict, please don't go out and try some more research. Please. If you're sitting in this room, you are. Just, agree to it and realize you got 150 new friends. Congratulations. Right? 150 new family, I should say. This ain't even about being a friend. We go way past that in this fellowship. But the thing about it is that, in this whole process, my favorite line out of the big book is that nothing will so much ensure immunity from picking up another drink or drug as intensive work with another alcoholic. And that's been my experience, in my first 3 years of sobriety, I was trying to figure out how to stay clean, and so I love sweets, you know what I mean? I'm just an addict, right? So sugar's obviously going to come along right behind it. And I decided, how am I going to stay sober through Christmas? So I'm like, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to make Christmas cookies for homeless people. So I did that. I made 40 or 50 cookies. I put them in Ziploc bags. I went down to the park by my house in Pacific Beach, California. And, and I passed them out on Christmas Eve, and I said, hey, man, here's some cookies. I made these for you. Don't ever give up hope. I used to be just like you, man. I used to listen, and I had no hope. Please don't ever give up hope. And you know what every single person said? These cookies got weed in them? I'm like, no, these cookies don't have weed in them, you morons. I'm trying to help you out. I wish I was making that up, but I'm not. You know what I mean? I'm like, homeless people nowadays, they got no respect. You know what I mean? It's like, I'm like, no, man, I told you, I'm sober. I'm giving you hope. Jeez. It's a tough gig being sober in California, you know what I mean? But anyway, throughout that, that helped me start my company, right? And I use that company to help at-risk teens. You know what I mean? And help homeless people get jobs, you know what I mean? And by doing some baking stuff and giving back to the community, you know what I mean? And they even let me come into Williams-Sonoma and teach classes, right? So that's a big deal for me, you know what I mean? Because I used to live in the bushes, and then they invite me into the world's fanciest kitchen store. And, and I show up, and it's awesome because right by the door there's a picture of me all tatted up with my thing come make cupcakes with Chris, Chef Chris, right? And then next to it's that lady, the barefoot Contessa. You guys know who that is? What's her name? Ina Garten or whatever. And it's Hershey's in her little all prissy outfit. Come make lavender chiffon cakes. I'm whatever. But that's that was a gift of the program, and that and that allows me to give back because I get to show kids that hey, you know what? I used to be a homeless drug addict, and now I'm not. And, and whatever you guys need, let me help you with that. You know what I mean? And it's always been my thing, man. Service has always been my thing. That's really what keeps me sober. I mean, I got my relationship with God. I got a God I do some business with. But even that was tough in the beginning, you know what I mean? Because remember, I came from a missionary family. So, like, I had a real hard time between getting to steps 2 and 3 without jumping ahead to 4 and 5. You know what I mean? Because every time I would get to 2 and 3 and I'm trying to get this relationship with a higher power, I start thinking of God, and then I start thinking about my dad, and I start thinking about hate, and I start thinking about how much, like, I don't want to be a part of anything God has to deal with because of, what happened between me and my dad. And finally, my 17th sponsor got through to me, and I'm glad he did. I'll be forever grateful. But, the thing about it is that, I came up with my own, not just my own concept of God, but, I came up with, my slogan, which is GOD, gratitude or death. That's my God. That's how it was in the beginning, you know what I mean? And I built off that. And then when I went back out for that time, you know what I mean? When I got back, I'm like, okay, I don't understand this. I've been trying to get sober for 10 years. And then for 3 years, I had it, and everything came back, and then I still blew it again. Like, what didn't I do? I had sponsees. I went to meetings. I spoke at meetings. I managed a sober living. I had a job. I had all this stuff. I'm like, what wasn't I doing? And I'm like, the only thing I can think of is, like, prayer and meditation, Because I used to pray for, like, the first year and a half, right? Like, God, this is awesome. Thanks for keeping me sober. Right? Think this is killer, right? And then, then all of a sudden I'm in a relationship. I'm like, well, I don't really want to pray tonight. That might ruin the mood. Right? Because I haven't been saved from a life, threatening disease or anything. I'm like, that's kind of embarrassing. You know what I mean? I don't really want to get down on my knees and pray. Like, she's already asleep. I'll do it tomorrow. Right? Don't do it tomorrow, man. Do it today. Do it all day today. And that was one of the things. Right? And people always say, and I used to say the same thing, like, oh, I'm not good at meditating. I hear that all the time. And I'm like, okay, great. Here's the new deal. You guys ready? Like, have you ever, like, been driving home from scoring some dope and had a cop pull behind you? And you're like, dear God, please don't let that cop pull me over. Please, God, don't let that cop pull me over. Well, guess what? Now you know how to pray. You ever been so dope sick you laid on the bathroom floor with, like, just your face against the tile, and you're like, oh, God, please don't think about anything. I don't want to Ralph anymore. Yeah? Congratulations. Now you know how to meditate. I just saved your life. Prayer and meditation. There you go. You're welcome. That's all I got. No. But seriously, I mean, that's it. That's how you start. You don't need to be in a room filled with a bunch of candles and, like, a waterfall soundtrack and, wearing all white clothes. Like, man, we're heroin addicts, man. Just take a minute and breathe. That's meditation, okay? We're trying to just get through the day. You know what I mean? Say the serenity prayer, take 30 seconds, and don't think about yourself. If you can do that. It's tough for me. I'll be honest with you. It took a long time. But you know what? In the last 4 years and 8 months and 30 days, I have not missed one single day of prayer and meditation. Not one. If I have to fly to Chicago and I leave San Diego at 10 p.m. and I get into Chicago at 5 a.m., you know what I'm doing the first thing I do when I get to the hotel? Prayer and meditation. I don't need sleep. You know what I mean? I don't make that excuse anymore. I'm like, oh, I didn't get to bed till like 2 a.m. last night and I got to go to work at 6. You know what? I go to bed at 2, I wake up at 4:30. Because, man, this thing's just waiting, man. Like, you guys heard, like, just a little bit of the story. You know what I mean? Like these are, like, numerous times, right? We won't even go into all the overdoses and all that other stuff because that's a waste of our time. We're talking about the solution today, right? The opposite of addiction is connection, right? And that's why we're all here. Because that's what works for us, right? Like, when we can look one other person in the face and say, hey, man, I know what you're going through. I was just like you. And now I got a different way, man. You want to try it? And they're like, I don't really believe you. I'm like, I bet you don't. But look at my results. Actions speak louder than words. And that's it. And when people see me being of service, when people see me doing all the things that I do, they know that, like, okay, man, this guy knows what he's talking about, you know? And that's it, you know what I mean? It's like such a humbling experience to be just a part of this conference, let alone to be up here speaking tonight, you know? Like, man, what a trip. And I do the same thing, you know? It's like, before I speak, my prayer is, God, please just, have me open my mouth and have you say the words, man, to somebody that needs to hear something tonight. And then I crank Pennywise Bro Him. You know what I mean? Because that's like the best song ever. If you guys don't know it, listen to it, man. That song's like, ah! Get you fired up. But the, you know, when I'm working the steps and I'm having a hard time with that God thing, and I realize that I have to be of service, you know what I mean? And I have to just start talking with God like he's just like my best friend until I fully get that relationship, you know? And the thing about it is that I always ask him, I'm like, anytime I'm going through a tough thing, I always say, God, please help me be of service to somebody else, because I know somebody else out there is suffering more than I am. And that's always been the case, and he's always done it, man. I had about 6 or 7 months sober, and I had my first sober date, right? And I called it a date. I think she was just going to meet me at the concert, but anyway, it's not important. You know, I was going to see my favorite band, Social Distortion, and you know, and when I got there, like I get this text from her saying, "Oh, sorry, I can't make it." I'm like, "Sorry, you can't make it? What is the matter with you? This is supposed to be like the best day of my life. You're ruining it." And you know, and so she didn't make it, and it was like one of those things of like where when I walked into the concert and I looked around, it was like everybody had two things that I didn't. They either had a date and a drink, and I had none of that. And I just felt like everybody was like pointing and laughing, like, ha, ha, ha. And so I'm standing there, and about 30 minutes in, man, I'm just so restless, I can't even take it, man. I'm like literally just shaking in my skin. I'm like, I can't take this. But I'm like, but you know what? Here's the deal. Like, I love music. I wanted to be a rock star my whole life, and that didn't work out. And now I'm sitting here watching my favorite band, and like, I don't want to be sober. I can't do this. Right? Like, if I'm going to be sober and miserable, then I don't want to be sober. I don't care. And so I'm like, all right. So I go upstairs and I pray. Starting to see a theme here. And I'm like, God, help me be a beacon of light to somebody who needs me in this concert. I know there's somebody else in there that don't want to do dope today. And I walk back in, and I see this guy standing behind me, and it was somebody's, like, dad. You know, he looked like a dad. And it's easy to point out the dads at Social Distortion, you know what I mean? Because everybody else is like black leather, like, you know what I mean? This guy's like not. And he comes over and he stands next to me and he's like, "Hey, man, can I talk to you for a second?" I said, "Yeah, man, what's going on?" He said, "Do you know who this band is?" And I'm like, "Yeah, Social Distortion." He says, "Yeah." He says, "Do you know about the lead singer?" And I said, "What do you mean?" And he goes, "Well, you know that he's clean from dope. You know, he's like, he used to be a heroin junkie." And I said, "Oh, yeah, I do know that." And he says, "Okay." He goes, "You know, I don't know how I can tell you this, but my son Nick just died of a heroin overdose a week ago. And he used to say he was so inspired by this band. And he left these 2 tickets up on his refrigerator. And honestly, man, I'm just here because I wanted to hear if this guy could say something to me that I could have said to my kid to keep him from dying." And I was like, "Budge," but I didn't say fudge. And I'm like, "Man," I go, "that's crazy, man." I said, "You know, what's your name?" He said, "My name's Jim." I said, "My name's Chris, man. Do you have a minute?" He said, "Yeah." I said, "Let's sit down, let's talk." And I told him about my story, right, about being a junkie most of my life and how I finally had a couple months of clean time and I was having a hard time and I needed something, and that I didn't have a dad. You know, like me and my dad, we had quit being friends. I had quit talking to him years ago because I could never get over the resentment long enough to stay clean, and I had to stay clean, so I quit talking to him. And I said, "You need a son, I need a dad. What do you say we team up?" Right? And he was like, you know, and the light came back in his eyes. You know, and this is crazy, right? Because I'm sitting in a Social Distortion concert crying with somebody's dad, right? I'm not getting any dates that night. You know what I mean? They're like, what are these guys doing here, man? You guys are bringing the party down, right? And I call that guy today, I call that guy Jim Dad, you know? And he's like my manager, you know what I mean? Like, I get these phone calls all the time. They're like, "Chris, I'm at a treatment center in Fallbrook. They need to hear your message. Can you be here tomorrow at 1? I'm like, "Yes, Jim Dad, I'll be there." And you know, and that's awesome. And I love that, you know? And I love the fact that we have that relationship today, you know what I mean? And I love the fact of, like, that's how we got it, you know? And you know, it's just, when I look at and see like all the different lives of people that I've been able to, hang out with people, and when I work with at-risk kids, and it's like a big deal for me, and I go around, and I get to speak to junior highs and high schools and stuff, and what's kind of been crazy is that I talk more about addiction to non-addicts than I do to addicts, and that's just a gift. You know what I mean? God has given me that gift because people don't know what it's like, Like I love talking with addicts because you guys understand what I'm talking about. But I also love talking to non-addicts so like that I can, hopefully explain to them like, hey man, like don't give up on your kid. Don't give up on your wife or your husband, man. Like they have the disease of addiction, you know what I mean? It's not a moral choice. You know what I mean? They don't want to like burn you for all your money and disappear for 4 days and steal and wreck the car and cheat on you and all these things. Like they need help, And that's like one of the things that like we're talking about. In the last 4.5 years, man, my life has seriously just, I don't know what to do with myself anymore, I get to do all these great things, and it's because of this fellowship. It's because of this program, right? And I get to do it all with you guys, It's like a team effort, And it's like one of the things that has been so great is like not only getting like my family relationships back, but like knowing that I can go through anything and not pick up again, And there's these like things that come up that I think I'm never going to be able to handle sober, and then I get through them, right? And I'm still clean. And this last week has been kind of crazy for me. I got a call last week, and 2 years ago, I'd done some work on myself, some personal development work, and it was going through the steps again, and getting really clear. And and I saw the fact of like that my dad had like some serious stuff going on in his life when he was very young. And on one day, I had an older brother that was stillborn, and he died. And then on the way home from the hospital, my dad went by his parents' house, and he found my grandfather had shot himself to death. And we never talked about it. It's just one of those things, And in this moment, I had seen how like my dad went through all this stuff, and that no wonder he was such an asshole, because like anybody that goes through a situation that traumatic is going to be filled with fear and controlling. You know what I mean? But my whole life, I just thought, I blamed God. I'm like, well, I'm not going to be a friend of God's because look what it did to my dad. But the thing is I called him up and I said, hey, Pop, like I just want to let you know I haven't talked to you in like 6 or 7 years at this point, and I don't really want to talk to you, but I just want to say I forgive you. And that I've finally gotten to a place in my life where I can let that anger go. And I wanted to share that with you and let you know that if you ever need help with anything, as a grown man, I'm here to help you. And he says, son, how did you know? He goes, I'm sitting here, it's 8 o'clock in the morning. I'm drinking wine out of a coffee cup. Your mom divorced me. Your sister don't let me see the kids or the grandkids anymore. I got no friends, and I'm sitting here drinking myself to death. He's 70 years old. He said, would you please help me? I said, yeah, man, I'll help you. And so, we started writing letters back and forth because I said, you know what, you explain your side of the story. Because if I talk to you, you're going to hear the emotion in my voice and you're going to change your story like you do every single time. Because I had probably done like literally 5 or 6, 8 steps with my dad, right? And we'd go over all that stuff, and what would happen, right? You would be like, I'd be like, you know what, Dad? Okay, now that I'm not angry anymore, we should have a beer together, father and son time, And that would always start it off, And that was the thing is like, I'd been so selfish my whole life, not even, consciously, but it's just subconsciously, that I was finally able to give back to him, right? And then, and it's so funny because he's like, hey, what about one of those big book things? And I said, yeah, man, you got to go to a meeting to get one of those. He says, well, can I buy it on Amazon? And I said, well, I guess you could. I don't know. I've never bought one on Amazon. And so he bought one on Amazon. He sent me a picture. Hey, here I am with the big book I got on Amazon. I said, whatever works for you, Pop. And then, a couple weeks later, he was like, I think I'm ready to go to one of those meeting things. I said, all right, well, look one up. Get over there. And he did, And he celebrated 2 years on August 19th, you know what I mean? At 72 years old, and the thing about it is like going back, man, like I had the most profound experience on steps 8 and 9 because there was at one point that I belonged to a place called the Pacific Group which is a very structured AA group, and this was before I knew about Heroin Anonymous, and they gave me the donut commitment, you know, because I love sweets, and I was very passionate, still am, about donuts. And what happened was that I went to the donut shop one day, and they didn't have any money, so they gave me a blank check. And when I got there, I decided, you know what, I'm going to AA. And I know the donut shop owner for, you know, like I was always there because I was always stoned or high most of my life, so I knew the guy like he was like my family, you know. And I say, and his wife was there. I'm like, you know what, I'm going to write you this check over a few bucks because I need to go to the store and get paper plates and stuff, you know. And she was like, I don't know, Chris. I'm like, come on, you know I'm over there at the AA now. You know what I mean? I'm a good guy. And she was like, okay, this one time. So she did that, and she gave me the money. And on the way back to the AA meeting, somehow my heroin-addicted car decided it was better if we just took a left-hand turn and went back down into East Los Angeles. And within 30 minutes, there was like, you know, a 250-pound heroin dealer with a dozen donuts, and he was, you know, a little bit lighter on the balloon scene, you know what I mean? And I never made it back to that meeting or that donut shop. And this was, you know, a couple years ago when I was making my amends. I'm like, man, I got to go back there, you know what I mean? And at this point, it had been literally like, probably like 8 years. And I got up real early in the morning, and I drove all the way across to L.A., and I was like, man, I was like nervous. I'm like, hopefully he just won't be there. And I walked in, and he's standing right there. I'm like, okay, hopefully he won't remember me. And then what does he do? He's like, Chris, where have you been? And I'm like, King, you remembered me. He goes, of course I remembered you. Last time you were here, you burned my wife for $50. He said, but that's not what I'm mad about. He said, what I was mad about is that you were my favorite customer. You came in here every day, man, and everybody else, they don't care about me. They come in there, give me a glazed donut, give me whatever donut, and then they walk out. He said, you would always come in and say, hey, how you doing today, man? How's your family? How are your daughters? You would always say, I had the best donuts in town. I didn't tell him why I was in that state of mind, but it's not important. He said, I knew something was wrong with you, and I thought that you died, and I missed you, my friend. And I was just like, oh. I'm like, hold on. I wrote this for this amount of money, but you know what? After that, let me give you a few more. You know what I mean? Because now I feel really guilty. But that was just the power of working the steps, right? Like that whole interaction, like was just, you know, made me like 20 years younger, and it like filled my heart with joy, and you know, at the same time, it got rid of all that shame because I didn't have to walk around with my head held down anymore. That was important for me, you know, that whole shame, stress, and lack of connection. You know what I mean? That's what keeps us down. Now, on a side note, I do get free donuts there now, so just saying, if you haven't made those amends, get out there. You never know what's possible. But you know what? That's just the thing. You know what I mean? And it's like I continue to work the steps, right? And I just told you I pray and I meditate every day, and I got step 11 and then step 12. You know what I mean? Like everywhere I go, man, I carry the message. And you know what? And it's like I don't tell people that I'm a heroin addict. I show people that I'm in recovery. That's the difference. You know? And I might tip you a little bit extra. I'm always going to, and you guys know if you hang out with me, like when I walk into a room or when I walk into the grocery store or whatever, like those people are getting talked to whether they want to or not. That's it, you know what I mean? Like my good friends. Plus, you know, I'm so stoked that my good friends are here, man. I've known these guys my whole life pretty much, and they're also in the program, and that's cool with me. And that's how, those are the only people that I have still alive, basically, you know what I mean? Because we all know what happened to everybody else that didn't make it in, you know? And I want to dedicate this talk to them because I know everybody in this room's lost somebody that they love. And the fact that we're just here is such a gift. You know, on Sunday, or last Thursday, I got a call that I needed to come up a little bit early. And so I came up and I drove down. And, you know, my dad has been diagnosed with stage 4 pancreatic cancer. And you know, and they called and they said, you better get up here, you know. And, you know, and I went, and, you know, it was one of those, it was like a scene out of the movie, you know what I mean? He was laying there, and, you know, he's pretty much, you know, he's already in hospice, and he couldn't really talk, but for like, you know, he saw me, and he, you know, he got up out of bed, or he got some help out of bed, and he sat in a rocking chair, and we just held hands, you know? And it was like, man, I got to tell my dad that I loved him, after not telling him for almost 35 years that I never loved him. You got to tell me he loved me, which I, you know, I don't think I had heard that. You got to tell me he's proud of me. that I'm clean. I got to do this cool book thing or whatever, you know what I mean? And I only had one copy, and I gave it to him, you know, and he looked at it, and he says, son, you did it. And I know what he meant by that, you know? And then pretty much that was it, you know? And like, and I didn't even think about using, you know what I mean? Instead, I was like, man, you know, how many other people do I know who's have family that have died of cancer, or people in this program, you know what I mean? Like, he died clean and sober, right? And in the last 2 years, he was able to go back around and make those amends to my mom and to my sister, and you know, and other people in his life, and he was able to forgive himself, and he was able to forgive his father for killing himself and leaving him, you know, at 19 years old without any fatherly direction, you know? And man, that is powerful. And that's because of this program, right? Like, I don't know how to do stuff like that. I don't know how to erase 3 different, you know, origins of family people that were all alcoholics that all died without telling each other that they loved each other. I don't know how to erase a 25-year, you know, butting heads with my dad or with anybody else in my family over some stupid stuff, some ego stuff, right? I don't know how to humble myself enough to go in and hold this man's trembling hand while he's dying and tell him that I love him. But because of this program, I do, right? And now I'm at peace with it, right? And that's just it, man. And then I get to come here and hang out. Then I get to do a bunch of other cool stuff too, man. You know what I'm doing on Sunday? I'm going to see my ex-wife. What? Yeah. She invited me to her house. She lives in Seattle. Right? Like, those are all gifts of the program, man. This is the same woman that kicked me out on my birthday for doing dope in the garage and changed all the locks and left me with nothing in the bushes in Hollywood, California. And I've forgiven her. You know what I love right there? That's called laughter. I call that the sound of the undead. And that's what this program has given me back. You know what I mean? Like I said, man, I just do the simple things that I'm asked to do in here. I always clean house. I keep my side of the street clean. I work with other people. I keep my connection to God strong as I possibly can. And more importantly, I always reach my hand out to help other people. That's all I got. Thanks for letting me share.